Looks like the Dune worm.
We the children of light, and we will never let up, never giving up fighting.
The moment I saw this sleeve design in Pattern Magic 2, I knew I wanted to try it out for myself. This structural accordion sleeve would be a great addition to a dress, a jacket, or any clothing that you want to add a little bit of drama to. It does take a bit of time, and I'll say it's more an advanced or experienced project because of how finicky the assembly can be. But if you watch the tutorial through, you should be able to recreate one for yourself. I'm going to do the pattern, cut and stitch everything together, and then show you what it fits like. This is going to be on only one side of my arm or one sleeve, but if you wanted to do it on both, you have the freedom to do so. It's worthy of note that this one sleeve took me 2 meters of fabric and hours of fusing with interfacing, but with everything done, I say is a project that is worth trying out if you're someone who likes experimental or avant-garde type of fashion. Okay, if you're curious to see how I made this piece, make sure to keep on watching. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoy it, and let's get straight into the video. To save me time, I'm going to be working from my basic bodice patterns front and back to create the shoulder piece that this design has. In addition to this, I'm going to take some additional measurements such as around my neck, my arm side, and how wide I want the individual discs that this sleeve has, how much I want the width to be. Once I have those measurements written down, these are the materials and fabrics that I'm going to be using for this project. I'm using 2 meters of Duchess satin. I would say use a fabric that has a little bit of weight so it holds the shape well. I also have some poppers or snap fasteners for the collar and bias tape to help me finish the hem and the shoulder opening. And then I have some interfacing. This is the type that it's iron on. You place it on the wrong side of your fabric, you iron it, and it sticks. I'm going to jump right into creating the patterns for this project, and I'm going to match the shoulders of my basic bodice patterns like this, overlapping it in such a way that they match along that shoulder seam. I'm just going to put some tape here to prevent any movement, and then I'm going to place some pattern paper over this and trace off the front and back neckline. This way I have a neckline shape that I like. Now I'm just connecting those dashed lines together using my pattern master and my marker pen so the lines are visible for you guys. And then the front neckline is 2 inches away from the shoulder point. For the arm hole or the side that sort of sits to the side of the shoulder, it is 3.5 inches below the shoulder point for the front side. This I'm going to connect together so you have like a raglan looking shoulder piece that connects to the collar and to the sleeve design. For the back slant, I'm marking 3 inches below the shoulder point on that outer edge, which is going to sit into the sleeve, and then the neckline is 2 inches away from the shoulder point. Those I'm going to connect together to create the slant for the back. My aim here is to create a piece that does not require a shoulder seam. That's why I'm going through this ordeal of layering the bodices together and then tracing off these particular points. Once I have these in place, I'm going to add a 1 centimeter seam allowance all around the pattern at my grain line, annotation, and notches, and this is the first pattern piece. You need to cut 2 pairs if you want one on each side, but I just ended up cutting a pair and using a pair for this project because it's a one shoulder sleeve situation. Once I have this pattern done, the next pattern I'm actually going to work on is the collar piece, which is essentially just a rectangular shape that would go around the neck, and it would have an opening where the poppers or the snap fasteners will be. My collar is 17 inches long, which is 2 inches longer than my around neck measurement, and it's 2.5 inches wide. This I'm going to cut a pair and then fuse them so it's nice and stiff and it stays flat around my neck. For the final pattern piece, I folded a piece of paper twice, so I have folded edges on both sides, and I want my disc radius to be 6.5 inches. Now this is on the big side, it is very out there, so you can make yours smaller, like 4 or 3.5 inches if you want something a bit more understated, but you still want to have that impact. So marking that 6.5 across, I'm going to connect them together. So I have a quarter of a circle drawn here, and once I cut this particular edge along this curve like so and open it out, I have a full circular piece. I added 1 centimeter seam allowance before cutting out this particular pattern because I'm going to be adding the opening where your arm would actually go through somewhere off center on this circular pattern piece. Now this is what the disc looks like with a radius of 6.5 inches. To create the inner circle that allows your arm to go through, you will need to measure your arm side, which is around your top arm, and whatever that measurement is, that becomes the circumference of the circle that you would create inside the main one that we just did earlier on. Factor that measurement into the formula for finding the radius of a circle, and you would end up with the radius that you need to use to draw in that inner circle. Mine ended up being 3.3 inches after measuring my arm side of 21. Throwback to compass because I forgot about this tool and I'm bringing it back again. I'm sorry. It just makes drawing circles a whole lot easier. So I would adjust the width of the compass to the radius and essentially just draw in the circular shape. It is important to draw the circle slightly closer to one edge because you want your arm to go in and you don't want the disc to be too close to your body. So you want the wider side to be on the outer side of your arm. Now I've adjusted it by 1 centimeter or roughly half an inch, and I'm just drawing in the seam allowance in like so. If you don't have a compass, you can do the method of marking from the middle point with that radius measurement and then adding the seam allowance like I did for the main outer circle earlier on. You can do that technique as well, but I've just found that compass just makes it quick, easy, and saves me time, and the circle is nice and neat. So these are all of the 3 pattern pieces I'm going to be using for this project: the main disc, the shoulder piece, and the collar. These I'm going to pin onto my Duchess satin fabric and cut them out. Now for the main piece or the circular shapes, I'm going to be cutting 8 pairs because I want it to be a full long sleeve. You can work with less, you can work with more, depending on the vision that you have in mind. After cutting all of the pieces, I'm going to go in and fuse them with interfacing, which is a material that has like glue on one side, and this glue melts under heat. There are different types of interfacing. I've done a full video on this actually, like different types, different weights, depending on the project that you are working on. This took forever, because I had to fuse all 16 individual circles. It took me like a whole day just doing that particular step. I'm not kidding. But if it's done well, it would help to give the piece a lot more body and structure. I also fused the shoulder and the collar pieces as well in preparation just to join everything together. It is time to sew all of the pieces together. I'm going to be doing this in an assembly manner or form. So I'm putting right sides together of a pair of these circular discs, and I'm going to be sewing them around the outer edges first. So I'm going to pair up the pieces like so. So just put right sides together, sew on a 1 centimeter seam allowance, and once I'm done doing that for this set, I'm going to essentially just repeat the same thing for the other set. And once I was done joining all of them in pairs, this is what they look like. I'm going to go in and actually trim down the seam allowance, so when I turn this inside out, the edges are a lot smoother and cleaner. I'm going to just push it through the middle opening that we made earlier on, and once I have that turned out in place, I'm going to take this to my iron and actually press it as flat and as smooth as possible. This I will repeat for all the other pieces, and this is what they are looking like. They look like donuts at this point, just like fabric donuts. And once I was done pressing all of them the same way I connected the first 2 pairs, I'll just repeat the same process. You would only need to join the inner side of corresponding circles or pairs, so you won't sew 2 layers to 2 layers. You want to sew it in such a way that you have the other edge free to attach to the next set of these pieces. This is the part that I say is a bit finicky or annoying to sew, because you're essentially sewing circular seams, and you would essentially need to push the fabric back a little bit to allow you see what you are sewing and then continue. It takes a bit of time because it's a step that you cannot rush, else you would end up stitching things that you don't want to stitch, which you might have to unpick and just waste even more time. After sewing them together on just a side, I'm going ahead to overlock them to finish those seams on the inside of the circles. This essentially, I just rinse and repeat until I have 4 sets of 4 discs like this. I went ahead to press all of the seams to relax the stitching, and I'm going to, in the same manner that I did for the first pair, put right sides together, ensure that the circles are aligned on the inner side, and I'm just going to be stitching the corresponding side of those 2 sets together, so I'm joining them together to create a longer piece of this particular design. So in the same way I stitched it earlier on, sew across, overlock, press, and at this point I had 4 pairs joined on each side. If you want to do a shorter sleeve, you just need about 4 or 5 pairs, but I want it to be really long, hence I'm going to be connecting all 4 pairs, the 2 4 pairs of these sewn discs together. These I'm going to be sewing on the 1 centimeter seam allowance and overlock afterwards. If you find it easier to sew by hand, especially this particular last step, I would recommend that, honestly, because it will just make you have more clarity and when you're sewing things in place. This is what all of the assembled, what would you call these discs? Round donut things. It kind of looks like there's a musical instrument that you play like this. I don't remember the name. If you remember, leave a comment down below. But let me just put this against my body to see how long it is. Oh, it's a bit too long. Okay, that's a bit too long, but I'm not mad. It makes for a really nice editorial sleeve. Wearing this like for everyday wear is not very functional, but if you're doing like a shoot or if you have an event and you want to make a statement, these sleeves are definitely quite cool. I am 5'2". I'm not very tall. I would say 8 is a bit too long, because see, I'll say like 6. If you're following the same dimension I did, I think 6 would be fine. For this width, 6 would be fine. Else you could just do 3/4 sleeves, so maybe do like 4, where it ends around your elbow if you want your hand to be visible, or you can just be doing it like this as you're wearing the sleeve, but it's very long. looks like the dune worm. So I'm going to go ahead and attach the collar, the raglan piece, and I think it would work for the concept for the dress underneath, because the dress underneath is a simple 1 shoulder long gown, hence why the sleeve is just going to be on one side. If I had the time, I would have definitely done it on both sides, maybe as a shorter sleeve, maybe as 3/4 on both sides. But now we're just going to go ahead and finish it, and I'll show you guys what it looks like at the end. Moving on to the shoulder piece, these are very diffused with interfacing on the wrong side of the fabric, and this is the piece that connects to the sleeve and the collar. This I'm going to sew with right sides facing each other, and I'm only sewing the slanted edges. I'm going to leave the arm curve and the neck open so I can turn it inside out. After sewing on the 1 centimeter seam allowance, I turned it inside out and pressed all of the seams nice and flat. I'm going to go ahead to work on the collar piece that allows me to actually wear this design, and this I'm going to sew on one edge and on the sides, because I want to have smooth clean sides where the poppers or the snap fasteners are going to sit. After stitching this all up, I trimmed down the corners, turned it inside out and gave it a press. I've been enjoying this technique of, if I know I'm going to be sewing like a folded edge by 1 centimeter, I press it first before going ahead to sew. I just essentially know I'm sewing along the fold line. At this point, I'm connecting the shoulder piece to the collar on just one side, and I started from the center front edge and worked my way towards the back. That's how I kind of gauged where I placed this particular shoulder piece. This, once I have pinned, I'm going to take to my machine and sew on a 1 centimeter seam allowance. I'm joining this in 2 steps because I want it to be nicely tucked inside of the collar piece, and it's one of those seams that, because you're joining a straight and a curved edge, you want to have full control as you're sewing. The second step, I essentially just went and folded the other side of the collar over the seam, and I'm top stitching it to conceal the seam and to finish up the collar piece of this sleeve design. After giving my piece a press with my iron to relax all of the stitching, this is what it looks like. The cool thing about this is that it kind of holds the shape along the shoulder because of how I made the pattern, and that open edge is what I'm going to be joining to one side of the sleeve. I'm just joining it in such a way that it sits on one edge, which is going to become the top or the shoulder edge, and this I'm going to be sewing on a 1 centimeter seam allowance. And after stitching it down, I'm going to go back in with the bias tape to finish off that seam. The beautiful thing with bias is it's so easy to stitch around curved edges. It doesn't really require a lot of like finicking and moving around, and this I did with one side as well as the hemline of the sleeve. The final step to finish up this project is stitching in the snap fasteners or poppers, and it usually comes as a pair, a top and a bottom, and this I'm just sewing by hand on the open edges of my collar. This is going to allow me to put the piece on and take it off as well, and this is what it looks like closer up. If you have the smaller ones, you can add up to 3, and if you have a bigger one, you can just use 1 or a pair. With that done, that completes the process of putting this piece together. I just enjoyed working on it, even though it was painstaking, but it was totally worth it. There are a few things I would do differently if I were to try this again. I'm not mad at the outcome, if I'm being completely honest, because whenever I try things for the first time, I don't expect it to come out 100% because it is the first time. This particular piece I'm going to wear over a 1 shoulder maxi gown, and I think we just added a little bit of drama to the look. But if you're going to be recreating this, there are a few things that you need to note. It does consume a lot of fabric. I used 2 meters for that one sleeve. It gets heavy pretty quickly, so just keep that in mind. And if you want the disc to actually hold the round shape, it might be worth adding, boning around the outer edge of your circular piece. But I'm happy with the outcome, and I hope you guys enjoyed watching this project. If you did, give this video a thumbs up, leave your comments and ideas down below, and will you be trying this out for yourself? Don't forget to tag me on social media at Kimdave Designs, and until my next video, have a good morning, afternoon and evening wherever you are. Bye.